guys, to episode 6 of FastForward U Presents Start Here, the podcast. I'm Carrie Ingram.
And Erica Avery.
And today we have another FastForward U guest on our podcast. And this person is super new, and you guys have never seen them or heard of them before if you are a part of the FastForward U family from years past. So we actually got a new director of student ventures for FastForward U, technically in February of this year, Josh Ambrose, and he has been just a whirlwind of excitement and newness and innovation at FastForward U. Once again, we're going to have a slightly altered intro in which we don't really talk about the industry facts beforehand, since this is more of a FastForward U based podcast, but we're really excited to share this interview that we just had with you guys. Josh is a very inspiring person, and I've really enjoyed working with him for the past month, but even more so now getting to know him a little bit better. So we're really excited to share him with you guys. All right, so hi Josh, how are you doing today?
Hey Carrie, I am doing wonderful. I just got out of a really invigorating meeting with my colleagues. And
for those listening, yeah, we were in the same meeting. So we're really excited to have Josh on this podcast episode today. And Josh, the first question I usually ask every single person on this is, who are you? So just kind of explain to our listeners who you are, where you came from, and what you're doing now.
Man, well, so my background is in creative nonfiction. And so the temptation here for me to both elaborate on my story and then go way back is very deep. But I'll try to do a concise little pitch here. The first thing that I would say about myself is that I have had a career in higher academia where I encourage students to be creative, and then I work to empower them to do something with that creativity. And that really is what my entire career has been built around. So as I said earlier, my advanced degree is in creative nonfiction. I started out by running writing centers and teaching in English departments. I then ended up overseeing a career center, and finally got promoted to a place at McDaniel College where I was Associate Dean of Campus and Community Engagement. And in that role, I oversaw study abroad, all of our career offices. I helped coordinate community engagement and volunteerism, scholarship and fellowships. I helped start and run our entrepreneurship program. I oversaw student clubs. Greek life indirectly reported to me. I oversaw a student center and a whole bunch more related to that. But basically anything that students were doing outside of the classroom that was not housing or food specific, I was involved in that and really enjoyed it. And through that work, I first learned of FastForward U through my mutual friend, Steve Kasoris, who is one of our executives here at JHTV. And so early on, he brought me down to Baltimore and to Remington and showed me the space that had just opened up at FastForward U and introduced me to my predecessor, Carrie Carden, and was really impressed with her and with the space and what was growing here at Hopkins. And so this last fall, when I heard that she had taken a position somewhere else, I went ahead and threw my name in the ring and was fortunate enough to get interviewed and ended up accepting a job here. So that's a real quick snapshot of my professional life. And I would say on my personal life, a couple things that I would briefly highlight in addition to my writing is that I'm a musician. I have two children, 6 and 4 years old. I have a big hairy dog who has a beard, just like I do, for those that are listening. And I love to garden. I love to be outside. And that's a little bit about what I do throughout the week. And yeah, there's lots more I could say, but we'll leave it at that for now.
So what about FastForward U and this position drew you to being head of the student ventures?
Yeah. I would say first and foremost, again, as I talk about loving to help encourage creativity and empower students to do things, I love just working with students that want to be creative and want to do things. And I have long said that my dream job is being part of a think tank where we are kind of troubleshooting and brainstorming and coming up with solutions. And I feel that in many ways, this position is exactly that, where I get to meet with students who are in the early ideation stage of their venture and give them feedback, and then also bring my skills as a connector and a sounding board to those discussions and help them take those next steps in their entrepreneurial journey. So that's the first and foremost thing, is again, that those relationships with students, those one-off interactions, very exciting to me, and something I really enjoy. I also like that FastForward U is young. It's only 2.5 years old. And throughout my career, I've taken things that were, there's a foundation, and I've helped take it to the next level. And so I'm excited to work with the team to do that at FastForward U as well. I think there's a lot of potential to scale it up in terms of how many students on Hopkins that it interacts with, and then also scaling up the community connections that it has. JHTV prides itself on having a goal of keeping the young startups that come through our offices here in the city, and as many of them plugged into our local network as possible. So I am very much looking forward to contributing to that mission and developing the kind of connections, and what the cliche term is, an ecosystem here in Baltimore, and to the point where student groups are like, of course we're going to stay here in Baltimore. This is where we have the connections and the foundation to put down roots and to grow our business. And I want them to have this be their default instead of going to Boston or California or whatever else might be in their radar.
So you mentioned being Associate Dean of Campus and Community Engagement, overseeing career services, study abroad, student engagement. How has that shaped your approach to working with students?
Well, I think one of the things that I would highlight is that, in the liberal arts, in higher academia, we love to talk about the whole person. The idea that what you learn in the classroom is relevant to the rest of your life. And I think that the roles that I have had really emphasize that and reinforce that idea that, whether it's a question of character or intellectual development, that the experiences that you have as a college student or a graduate student or a PhD candidate are relevant to every aspect of your life, not just to the classroom. And, the way that you live in your community, whether it's on campus or off, is highly relevant to your career and the ways that you want to interact with the world. And so I have devoted myself to trying to create opportunities that contribute in a positive way to that development of the self and who people are. And I should note here that this career that I have had has been a surprise to me. It was not, I have, out of all those jobs that I just told you about, I applied to one of them. Well, two if you count FastForward U, but I applied to the Writing Center back at McDaniel College. And then I was approached and asked to do all of those other initiatives. And, I just followed my interests, and, like I would say, oh, that committee sounds interesting. Can I hop on it? And, I would do it. And, a year or two later, I would find myself being the person in charge of it. And never because I asked, but because other people asked me. So yeah, I think, again, that intellectual curiosity and that interest in the world around you leads to lots of interesting opportunities that, again, reflect the ethos that you're learning in the classroom.
This kind of sparked a question for me in relation to you saying like you didn't foresee the career that you've had so far actually happening because it wasn't kind of in the plans. What advice would you have for students who feel similarly to this in general, like finding a career, or more specifically, students who are interested in entrepreneurship but don't necessarily know exactly where they want to go or have a plan for it yet?
Yeah. I would say, I used that word curiosity a moment or two ago, and I really think that that is so, so key to being an entrepreneur, where you are asking questions, you are poking at things, you are thinking about how things could be better. And so you're curious, and then you are making connections to help solve those problems, those things that you see. And if you do that, man, you are just such a valuable asset to existing companies or to starting your own. Um, I have told students for years that if you show up to work on time and you say what you are going that you I'm sorry, and you do what you say what you're going to do. So show up on time, do what you say what you're going to do. You're in the top 5% of all workers. Like, just that alone. And that's such simple advice. And then if you can be creative and offer proactive solutions to things and work well with your team members, you're in the top 1%, and the sky is the limit. And, I think that that has borne true in my own life, but it's also borne true in what I have observed with others. And the world needs people who work hard, are creative, and, we've called it lots of different names. We've talked about grit, we've talked about resiliency, we've talked about, all these kind of things. But, whatever that failure looks like in your life, your ability to take that in stride and keep going, we need people who can do that. And if you can, you're going to have success.
I like that you talked about really like carving your own path in your career. So you started McDaniel's program in innovation and entrepreneurship. So with a background in degrees like English and fine arts and creative writing, I like that you connected the dots between creative thinking and entrepreneurship, because when I first kind of read that in your background, I was like, how did he go from, these degrees in this background, and what drew you to turn to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I would say is, and I want to be clear here, I helped start that program. So I worked with a team, intercollegiate team, from many different departments, and I think that's actually part of the key to its success. And I think that it's actually a model. So we had history, we had science, we had communication, we had lots of different departments who all put their heads together and said, how do we help empower students to do these things? And so I think that was a big part of my onboarding process. But I also think that it points to the needs of startup teams and being an entrepreneur, because I love to tell this story. Very early on in our process, we had a whole bunch of alumni in the room, and I said to them, hey, what's the number one skill that I should be teaching to students who want to be entrepreneurs? And I thought for sure they were going to say computer programming, or they were going to say make sure everybody knows how to use QuickBooks. And and many of them agreed that those were valuable skills. But overwhelmingly, they all said teamwork, group work. So, and I was just amazed by that, because when you're in college, everybody hates group work, right? Like, and I remember when I graduated from college thinking, haha, finally I'm done. I'm not the one who's going to be carrying these groups on my back for the rest of my life. Lo and behold, every day that's what I do is group work, right? And so I think both in terms of forming a company, forming a venture, working again in academia, whatever the case is, learning how to work well with others and then bringing disparate elements to the table together is very, very important. And I think if you look at the success of many companies, it's borne out. I mean, people think about Steve Jobs all the time as this great, computer inventor. He did almost no coding and almost no design. He was a visionary, and then Woz did a lot of the actual nitty gritty for him. And there's lots of other examples as well, but I think group work is really, really key. And then the other big thing that I've always been struck by, so I've traveled a fair amount of the world at this point, throughout the United States, Europe, India, not every place in the world just yet, but I'm slowly racking it up. And what I always laugh about is the stories that I hear around the world, yeah, there's a lot of variety and there's richness there that I don't want to downplay, but I'm always amazed by the similarities between stories. And, just as a humorous aside, young people, teenagers and college students everywhere around the world say the same thing. We're bored. We don't know what to do. There's nothing to do here. I got to get somewhere where there's something exciting happening, right? And I realized early on that we create our own something to do. We create our own future and our own destiny in many different ways. And so if students or entrepreneurs cultivate their own story, they cultivate the message that they're putting out there. Again, whether it's for your own company or it's for someone else's, that's such a valuable skill. Real quick to just wrap a bow on that, I'll never forget, there was this time I was in 2 different leadership programs at the same time. And I had a morning where I started out in Carroll County, Maryland, again, about an hour outside the city, and we were touring a dairy farm. And I was literally stepping over piles of shit in the dairy farm. And then I got in my car and I drove down to Baltimore and I went up in a skyscraper overlooking the Inner Harbor, and I had a meeting with the mayor and the rest of her cabinet, and some other young professionals. And so on one hand, like, the contrast couldn't have been more stark, going from the barn to the skyscraper. And I had to change I had brought an extra pair of shoes and I changed them in the car because I didn't want to track in the dirt. But both meetings were all about storytelling. The challenge that they were talking about was, how do we attract people to our community? What do we do about crime? How do we tell the story of what's exciting that's happening here? What is good? What is interesting? What is the community that we're trying to build? And it was identical in these 2 very, very different areas. And so I've always been struck that, the messaging, the storytelling, how we talk about these things, is, that close second to group work, in terms of how we can capitalize on whatever background it is that we have and contribute to the mission of our ventures. So sorry if I went a little bit long there, but that's a little bit of a response to what you were asking about.
Yeah, and I really like that you talk about kind of the non-tangible skills, as we say, because I think a lot of, especially STEM students, but students in general, are told, okay, what hard skills can you put on your resume for people to look at when they're hiring you? But these other skills are really important, and can be life-changing.
And they're hard to quantify sometimes. And I think that's sometimes why students stumble over them. But there are ways to marry the 2 together, where you illustrate a soft skill by a hard number, of how many meetings you hosted, or how many connections you made, or how much money you raised, that illustrates the veracity of those soft skills that you're claiming.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because I definitely struggle with that, thinking, okay, here's this protocol I can follow, here's this, skill I learned as a scientist, but it's how do I communicate? And that's, I think that's really good advice for all the students listening who are very concerned about their resumes. So among other things, you also have served on a variety of nonprofit boards, involved in many causes ranging from technology development to Parks and Rec, and leadership programs in the region. So what drew you to such a diverse set of experiences and interests with such conviction? Because I feel like when I hear you talk, I can hear that you are really invested in all of these things that you do.
Well, thank you. Couple of different things. The first and foremost is, again, I just follow my curiosity. And so I try to cultivate a sense of wonder about the world. I feel like I'm coming across as a little starry-eyed here, and that could be, there could be nothing further from the truth. Growing up, my family called me Eeyore because I was so pessimistic and I was so cynical, right? Because I think as is the case with many romantics, we look at the world and we realize how effed up it is. And that can be very difficult to process as a young person. And I feel like an awful lot of college is that as well, where we're encouraged to think critically around the world around us. And there's all kinds of very disturbing statistics about how college students are less likely to get involved in their communities and less likely to get involved in politics. They often abandon, spiritual frameworks and stuff that used to be helpful to their families or whatever. And there's very good reasons for all of this. So again, when I talk about things in these starry-eyed terms, it's not coming from a place of naivete. It does come from actively choosing to cultivate curiosity and excitement in the world around me about what's possible. And then it comes as well from a really highly internalized locus of control, in that I want to be the change that I want to see in the world. And, when we talk about changing the world, again, it's one of those things that, it's such a cliche and it's so easy to mean nothing. But I believe that, as the song goes, that change starts with me. And then if I can impact just a couple people, that's a good use of whatever control, whatever power I do have. So I tend to get involved in things that I'm just curious about and I'm interested in. And then if there's an opportunity for me to give back in some way, I do. And so, I have always been someone who loves the outdoors, for example, and started networking with colleagues at McDaniel in the environmental studies department. And we ended up doing a forest banking project. And I went on a trip to Peru with my one colleague, and we've done a lot of conservation work in the area. And it wasn't because at any point I thought, oh, this will be good for my career. Never even crossed my mind. It was just that I loved being outdoors. I was curious about the work that he was doing, and I wanted to see more trees planted. And so I got involved in that work. And so, the same thing with the Tech Council and all of the Parks and Rec type stuff. It's just things that either I had a passing interest in or I knew someone and agreed to be a warm body in a seat and to give my time. And my last point there is that for our listeners who don't know this, a lot of educators, and especially entry-level educators, don't make a lot of money. And so it wasn't something where I could give away lots of money, but what I could give was my time. And so that's what I have done a lot of my life doing, is giving my time into things that I legitimately cared about. And, the paradoxical thing about all of that is it was ultimately helpful to my career. And it is helpful to my career because it was through my nonprofit work that I first started getting really involved in the local business community. And I started meeting all the entrepreneurs that were in my orbit and started giving back and networking with them and really diving in more there. So, yeah.
This is all awesome, Josh. And I always think it's funny because for those of you that are listening, Josh, this is his 4th week now with FastForward U.
Almost.
And it's funny because we've had so many meetings in the past month, but I like doing interviews because as a journalist, you just get to sit back and actually see someone's essence. And I feel so inspired. I feel like I'm back in the student seat listening to you. So one question I have for you is, what are some of the things in your everyday routine that keep you inspired or keep you in this creative mindset that you could recommend for our listeners?
Yeah. It's a great question. I read a lot, a lot. And I read fast. So, I'm on Reddit. I'm subscribed to various entrepreneurship and technology and the Baltimore subreddit, and I'm just constantly, if it's a little mental break between meetings, I'll just scroll through that and read it real quick. So that's something that is part of my daily routine. Walking that furry dog of mine and, chasing the kids around the house, I need those mental breaks. very much so. And, I think, again, going back to, am I this starry-eyed optimist? The other thing that people don't, I think, always realize about me is that I am not inherently an extrovert. And so I love meeting new people, and I love being curious about them. And that does, again, satiate my curiosity and stuff. But there's some of that that's a choice as well. And taking that interest, cultivating that curiosity in other people, helps keep me going. So yeah, those are some of my ways of cultivating that. And I listen to a lot of music, I watch a lot of movies, I read a lot of books, all of those kind of things.
You shocked me there with the extrovert comment, because I am always admiring extroverts because I feel like it's seamless with you. I would have never guessed. You got me fooled.
It's a lot of training, honestly. And when I was a kid, my parents were actually really concerned about me because I wouldn't talk to people. I was just too busy either watching and observing or just wanting to stay home and do XYZ, or whatever the case may be. So baby steps, if you embrace them and then keep investing in that, can go a long way.
I think that's a great segue into my next question. Since we have many young college students, just getting into what they want to do, or who are going to be fresh on the job market out of college, how did you gain the confidence, the ambition to take these various strides in your career with so much heart and vision, and stave off the things like imposter syndrome and fears and doubts and worries?
Well, I still have imposter syndrome all the time. Very, very much so. So, for example, in my career, I have always been in this interesting place where I am neither faculty nor staff. So I've never been on a tenure track, but I've always taught. I have never been fully staff because I'm also teaching. So I've always, for whatever reason, been on this interesting in-between place where I'm neither one nor the other. And that leads to some serious imposter syndrome, especially in academia, which, is sometimes obsessed with political lines and stature and who's who and what have you done and all those kinds of things. So I guess at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I just decided I didn't care about any of that. And I just wanted to follow work that was interesting to me. I'm going to relate this to another anecdote from long ago. When I was in grad school, I met this young man, a friend of mine, and he said, as soon as someone calls themselves an artist, you know that that's what they aren't. I don't know if I totally agree with him, but here was his point. A lot of people are more obsessed with the title than they are the actual work. And if you want to be an artist, if you want to be a creator, stop worrying about the title and just go for the work. Write the song, write the story, create the business, do the work, and take joy in the work. And if you are more concerned about having the word artist or creator or founder or whatever the case is attached to your name than you are the actual work, your joy is misplaced, and that effort is not going to be ultimately fulfilling and fruitful. And so a lot of the way that I have dealt with imposter syndrome, which again is real, it's constant. And in a role such as mine, where I'm networking constantly, I'm meeting people that are so much more qualified and so much more interesting in the work that they do. It's very humbling, but I just embrace that humility. I enjoy it, and I just instead take joy in the fact that I'm getting to meet these people. I'm getting to travel the world. I'm getting to interact with students who want to make the world a better place. And there is a lot of fun, and there's a lot of pleasure in that, in a way that both satiates my curiosity but also gives me a sense of purpose.
I think that's really great advice.
For the listeners, Josh, what are some ways in which they can get in contact with you or connect with you online after listening to this podcast?
Well, thanks, Gary. And here I was thinking that you were going to ask me how long I've been growing my beard or something like that, which for the record is, let me see now, I last shaved it for my friend's wedding. And so we're going on almost 10 years here since my wife has seen my chin. So
Wow.
it's been a long time. And in fact, a student just asked me last week, he's like, oh, wow, what a fashion statement. I was like, buddy, this is laziness right here. Like, I just hate how much time it takes in my daily routine. So I guess it's part of my persona at this point, but it was not a very concerted thing. But to answer the actual question here, you can email me at joshambrose@jhu.edu. And I love meeting with students who are anywhere along their entrepreneurial journey, whether you just are a beginning student who wants to get connected with a company, or you're thinking, I have some sort of idea and I want to do something with it, all the way to you're ready to scale and you're looking for significant funding. I want to meet with you. And again, please do keep in mind all of the many different hats that I've worn and how I might be of help to you. I just talked to a student today who was like, can I show you my resume? And I was like, yes, please do. Of course, I'm going to also connect you to our career services here at Hopkins and our friends over at the Life Design Labs, but happy to meet about things like that. So email joshambrose@jhu.edu. On there's a Zoom link and you can schedule a time that fits your schedule with me. And then I'm also really active on LinkedIn at the moment. So it's linkedin.com/Josh-Ambrose. That's also linked in my email and you can connect with me there. But my Twitter account is currently set to private and I don't even really post on there. And I deactivated Facebook around the election because I was so upset by how crazy it was. And so my other socials are pretty quiet at the moment. So email and LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach me. And of course, we're all hoping at FastForward U to be physically present in our space soon, and look forward to meeting with you there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. It's been great getting to learn more about you and having you on the podcast today.
Well, thank you, ladies. Again, your questions were very interesting and made for a good conversation.
Alrighty, guys. So fave finds for this episode. Mine is a book, and technically it's two books, but the one that I currently am reading every single day is called You Are a Badass Every Day. The first book is just called You Are a Badass. And I got this book, the first one, when I was still in college. I got it, I think, 2018, going into my senior year. And basically it's like a self-help book, but not super cheesy whatsoever. Before reading this book series, I should say I was not into self-help books at all, because I just thought that they weren't going to help my, mindset and really motivate me at all. And I thought that they were like really super cheesy and kind of like a gimmick. So this book series I like because the author really is so authentic about saying like, no, like life does suck sometimes, but here are the things that you can do to better your own life. And the first book I read in college, and I always tell people about it because it literally changed my mindset in my life. I feel like I was so much more set for being able to walk into the real world. So the You Are a Badass Everyday book I have downloaded on my phone, and it's structured different in the sense that instead of like reading chapters that are based on different subconscious things or things you should consider, it just literally has like 1 to 2 page passages that you can read on your own. And it just gives you like a little tidbit of a life lesson or like something to keep in mind during the day. And I find that starting off my days just reading one little passage helps me to kind of improve how I view life and get things done and just be happy all the time. So I found that to be my favorite find, and I thought it was relevant to Josh's conversation since he's like so into, inspiration and kind of making sure that you're creative and positive every single day. So yeah, that's my favorite find.
Yeah, no, I love that, especially, well, first of all, in time of COVID, when we A, need books to read, B, maybe need a pick-me-up every once in a while, but also, like you said, is relevant to what Josh is talking about, especially perspective-wise. And I think he was talking a little bit about, being an empathic individual, and when you're kind of going through your college years and really realizing how effed up, like you said, things are, and trying to keep perspective. So I think that's really appropriate. My fave find is me being the cold person that I am all the time. And I also have Raynaud's disease, which is like very common, especially in women, where you like lose circulation very easily in the cold. I bought this ceramic mug, which literally has a like pocket for your hands to just hold your warm tea or coffee or whatever. Actually, my friend found it for me. So that's my new favorite thing, to just, because it's so cold where I work too, to just sit there and try to be warm. I mean, luckily now things are starting to get warmer, but it's still freezing in our building. So yeah, that's my favorite find for all of my fellow cold people out there.
That's actually really freaking awesome. Do you know where your friend got that from?
I think it was at like a shop in like Roanoke, Virginia, but I think it's called something like Hug a Mug or something of that nature.
I think that's a brilliant idea. I'll try and find a link and put it in our descriptions for this, because I think that's awesome. I might get myself one, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm obsessed.
And you can still use it during the summertime, even when it gets warmer. You can just have like a little hand hugger.
Yeah.
It's comforting.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing, right? When like we're all lonely in COVID, we need just something to hold on to.
Just get yourself a hug-a-mug.
There you go.
That's perfect. Alrighty, guys. Well, that concludes this episode of the podcast, and we hope you guys enjoyed it. Let us know what is the little bit of tidbit information that you got from this podcast that you appreciated the most. And we hope you stay tuned for continued episodes. We're starting to record these completely visually now, so we'll still have our podcast link for audio, but you can check out our YouTube if you want to actually see our faces as we're having these discussions. Erica always makes me laugh because now we have the mask on, so I try to make expressions. But yeah, that's the rest of the podcast. So I'm Carrie Ingram.
I'm Erica Avery.
And thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys next time. Bye, guys.